Hello and welcome to Life of Creation. My name is Chad and I'm the host of this channel. Today we're talking to an old high school friend of mine. We became friends because we both loved hockey, we loved the LA Kings, and we both really loved hardcore music. And he is still very much involved in the hardcore scene. We are talking to Adam Lentz of Revelation Records, and he is going to answer the 10 questions. So let's get into it. Just use an overlay. All right, well, let's get into this before it gets too late. All right, I'm here with Adam Lentz, and he's going to answer the 10 questions. So, question one, what does it mean to you to live a life of creation?
Live a life of creation is to do things on your own terms that aren't necessarily things that are expected of you, whether it be art, music, just make something to give to the world. And it takes so many forms. I don't even think you can fully quantify creation. You can't. There's too many ways that it manifests itself. So there's no real way you could do it. It's just making something, like period. And I think a lot of like true creation comes from uniqueness and comes from your soul and inside your body and comes from a need for expression and and self-development. It's so many different levels too. It's impossible to talk about them all. It's one of the things that makes the human experience so awesome is that every single person on this planet has the potential to be creative.
Right. And I think that was the point of the podcast or videos is like, not everyone considers themselves creative or an artist, but it's like, yeah, but you are still a creator and you do have the potential to live a life of creation because anything you do could be a form of creation.
Yeah.
I think the root of it is intentionality. You intentionally do something. That act is then, I think, an act of creation.
You don't think you don't think you can be creative unintentionally?
Well, I think you can, for sure, because but I think when you start thinking about like the day to day stuff, where people don't consider it part of creation, but if you're intentionally taking the time to do something for someone, even if it's like I've given the example of saying hi to someone or complimenting someone, you took the time to intentionally say something to them that then creates a better day for them. Or you could lift their spirits based on that interaction that then allows them to go on through their day with better joy and, a better spirit.
Right.
It has like this ripple effect.
Yeah. And ultimately that's what we want, I think, is to, you know, enrich each other's lives.
Right.
That's
And
hugely
I think,
important.
yeah, I think that's the heart of it. Is a life of creation, meaning, does it mean to do something that enriches the lives of you and others?
Yeah. Yeah, and you can absolutely do it unintentionally, but
Right.
doing it intentionally and with meaning, has a lot of effect. And, being able to to create better experiences for other people is extremely satisfying. And
Yeah,
one of the best
definitely.
things about being a human is we have the power to make other people's lives better and more meaningful.
question too. I think most people view creators based on their end results and don't really see what all goes into the creation. Based on what you do, what are some things that are crucial to your creation that most people never see?
Oh, analytics, the spreadsheets, the knowledge of product is really important. And, people, I don't think, see the 23 years of experience that I put into it. And there's no way I could do what I do without that experience.
Right. I
And
mean, you're not
it's,
even including, all the years of going to shows even before the job.
yeah,
Like you lived this life, you know.
yeah, I did. That's right. So, even geez, going back to my teenage years, I was gaining the experience and the knowledge, and it was long and it wasn't always easy. And it's definitely not always like the process is definitely not always enjoyable. It's not always glamorous.
Yeah.
It's not always lucrative. I've been extremely poor at parts of my life because I wanted to live this life and I didn't care that I was poor
Right.
because it was more important to me to have this experience. Um, so people don't see that, like the work that goes into being able to do what I do.
Right.
And, as a facilitator of other people's creativity, if I didn't have these experiences and this knowledge that I have now, I wouldn't be able to do it the way I am.
Right. I mean, I think that also because of how you've lived your life, there is an authenticity to what you do
Yes.
that, you're not just someone who's selling records that just likes music. Like you lived it and you know it
Yeah. And
inside
I
and
care
out
about it.
and
And
you
I care
care.
about it.
Yeah.
And, one of my favorite things about being involved in punk and hardcore is people who aren't there for the right reasons and aren't living it, you can sniff them out so easy.
Right.
And there's a lot of people who will do a band or do a label, and if you're doing it for the sole purpose of, fame or money or whatever, you're going to get found out
Right.
and you're not going to be perceived well. And I think that's one of the best things about it
Right.
is that there's a level of authenticity that is required.
Yeah. Yeah. You won't last unless you're authentic.
No. And what's cool is I've been to shows in many countries, in many states, and if you walk into the room and you know what you're doing, it doesn't matter that you're from out of town.
Right.
If you walk in there and you're just it's easy to figure out someone who's just like, oh, I'm just going to be here for a little bit and I'm not going to really care. I'm not going to contribute.
Right.
You know, you're not going to make it. You're not going to last.
I always felt like an imposter. I mean, not necessarily in the Christian world, but in the secular scenes that I would go and shoot photos at, because I always was like, oh crap, I'm the Christian. I'm going to get sniffed out, and these guys aren't going to like me, or whatever. So I always felt like an imposter because I was like not singing the songs where they're bashing Jesus or doing something like that. But I think I eventually got over it because I would just consistently show up to
Hmm.
these people's shows and I would support them, be with them.
And that's what's awesome about punk and hardcore is just being there and paying your money at the door. You're having a positive impact.
Right,
Like the shows, a lot of them are so small.
right,
The one extra person that's going to be there, that's going to give their $10 at the door, you made a difference just by doing that.
right,
That's it. And so even if you're not in a band, you're not doing a zine, you're not putting out records, you're not doing anything, just being there,
right.
you helped. You helped.
Yeah,
And that's so empowering.
yeah,
In a world that is otherwise very unempowering, that's so empowering.
yeah. And I would try and, buy the records as much as I could,
Yeah,
just because it was like, I loved what they were doing.
yeah,
And I was kind of older at the time, but it's just kind of like, you guys are, you guys have my heart because I just love what you're doing.
yeah. And to be totally honest, is I've over the last few years, I've kind of taken a step back from going to shows and stuff. So when I do, I kind of feel like the imposter because I don't know as many people.
Right,
You know, I can't stand up for long periods of time. So sometimes I have to leave just because I'm physically uncomfortable.
right,
And sometimes you go to a show at the Sage and look around and everyone's at least 15 years younger than you. So it's really easy to feel out of place.
right,
And, it happens. There's nothing wrong with getting older, but there have been a few times lately that I've felt out of place because I kind of like for the first time in my life feel a little bit disconnected.
right. I wish I had an answer for how to not make that happen, but I
There
think
isn't one.
there isn't one. And I think that's
Yeah.
just the natural process of aging. But then it's like what we were talking about earlier was now you move into a facilitator role where
Hmm.
you can then open up doors that they couldn't.
Exactly. And you're going to give that next generation the opportunities that you had and
Right.
hope that they then pass it on to another generation.
Question 3. Do you believe you need to be passionate about what you create?
I thought about this one earlier. No, I think there are people who have absolutely hated what they do who created beautiful things.
It's true.
I'm sure there's probably, scientists working in labs who don't like what they do, but they might have found a cure for something.
It's true.
Maybe they're still passionate about it in some way. I don't know. I can't think about what's in other people's heads, but I'm sure there's people out there who create positive things who aren't necessarily passionate about it. I think the vast majority of creation is done via passion,
Yeah.
but I'm sure there's exceptions to the rule.
I've talked about it with a few people, and, you know, most people who are living a life of creation, just consider it a journey that they're on. And you may not be passionate about everything along that journey, but you might have a deep passion for the journey.
Yes, there's plenty of stuff that I've done. I'm not passionate about accounting
Right.
or analytics or, you know, inventory reports,
Right.
but it aids me in doing the grander thing that I'm passionate about.
Question 4. I don't think your creation has to be good to grow from it. What are some things you create that might not be considered great, but something that you still gain value from the creation? And then, do you have any words of encouragement for those who get discouraged when their creations fall short of their expectations?
Punk music, it's terrible. It's not good, but we create it anyways because we love it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Like I mean, I like even like as a kid, like I used to write dumb poems and paint and draw pictures that you couldn't even tell what it was because I was so bad at it. But I enjoyed it,
Right.
you know. Like you listen to a lot of like really harsh music, like black metal or harsh noise or a lot of the death metal stuff that I listen to or grindcore, and it's like, dude, that's horrible. But the people doing it probably absolutely love it.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, good and quality is subjective for the most part.
Yeah, definitely.
It's totally arbitrary. And as long as someone gets fulfillment out of it, it doesn't have to be great.
Right. I mean, my wife almost broke up with me while we were dating when I took her to a hardcore show. She's like, "Yeah, I can't do that. It's
Oh yeah, my
terrible."
wife's yeah, Lauren's a civilian too. Her her first hardcore show was in Brooklyn, New York. and it was it was interesting to say the least. Like I went up and sang a song with one of the bands, and I was like, "Did you see me up there?" She's like, "Yeah, it was terrible." I was so bad the sound guy cut the mic, dude.
It's
It
awesome.
was insane. But yeah, it doesn't have to be good.
Right. I mean, it's all about the enjoyment. And,
Yeah.
I talked to a kid, men especially have a hard time expressing emotions and, dealing with their mental health and all that kind of stuff. So he's like, punk, metal, hardcore is the best mental health outlet that men have.
Mhm.
Because it's like you can scream your head off and just let it all out. And it doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to make sense.
And you and and it's not stigmatized.
Right.
And you can do it and not actually have to talk about what's bothering you.
Right.
But you can still it's still the best outlet. What
It's
was the
great.
second part of that question? I already forgot it.
Um, do you have words of encouragement for those who get discouraged when their creations fall short of their expectations?
Yeah, it doesn't matter,
I mean,
you
it's
know?
all part of your journey. It's
Yeah.
mistakes happen. It's never going to be good at start anyway.
Do you know how many I've tried to write so many songs and poems and short stories, and I've literally scrapped every single one. Literally every single one. But it never discouraged me from doing it again.
Right.
It's because it felt good in the moment. And, a lot of those kind of creations, like I don't even care if anyone hears it or reads it or sees it or whatever. It's for me.
Right.
And, that's creation in its purest form.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably you hit the nail on the head is like create for yourself. It doesn't matter if it's great or anything. If it's feeding your soul by doing it, that's ultimately the important goal.
But I think if someone can relate to it and get something out of it, I would say that's like the most important part. But making something that aids someone else's personal journey is incredibly satisfying.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. Being able to do something that someone else can relate to is
Yeah,
very
like,
satisfying.
it sounds super corny, but like seeing your name in the thanks list of a band's record. And, there was one band that actually, one of the members actually said, thanks to Adam for helping me realize, my musical journey in putting this record out. I was like, oh, wow, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
Like, that's heavy. And that right there, like, makes all the other things that failed worth it because that has deep meaning that it
right,
meant enough for him to put it on the record. It wasn't just like thanks Adam, thanks Chad, thanks this
right,
guy, thanks that guy. Like no, thank you, and this is why.
right.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I always got a kick out of seeing my photos on an album.
It's
Like
awesome, isn't it?
it's just so satisfying. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know if you knew, but there's that Circle Jerks live album.
At House of Blues.
I think so.
Yeah.
But the gatefold is just one big photo.
Hmm.
That's mine.
Did they credit you?
Yeah.
Ah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Joe Escalante actually gave me $200 for it too.
Did you know my story of my connection to Joe Escalante?
Uh-uh.
My dad taught with his sister at La Habra High School. When she found out that my dad's son was into punk rock, she told Joe, and Joe would get me in for free to Vandal shows in high school.
That's awesome.
So, yeah,
I mean, that just
little,
goes back to the just how cool the punk world is.
I know.
It's
Yeah,
amazing.
he'd never met me. And then years later, we helped distribute some Vandals records that they put out themselves. And Joe called me and I told him that story. And he was just like, that was you? And like, and you're still doing this? Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
partly because like you reached out to me and made me feel like part of it.
Yeah.
And that like reinforced and solidified my wanting to be there. It was people doing this kind of thing.
Yeah.
He didn't have to do that.
Yeah. Yeah,
We didn't
that's
have to do
amazing.
any of this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, getting that email from Joe, I was just like, "Oh my goodness. This is crazy." It was just
Yeah.
such a moment of, all right, I've arrived.
Validation.
Yeah, it was good of validation, and I had pictures on albums before, but it was just like such a legendary band.
Yeah.
Getting emailed and asked from such a legendary person within the punk world, and you're just like, what is going on?
Yeah.
It was a
All
great
those
feeling.
all those times you spent in crappy clubs and it's all worth it now.
Question 5. Not all creators would consider themselves artistic. Do you believe you have to be artistic to live a life of creation?
Absolutely not. Because as we said, creation manifests itself on so many labels. It doesn't have to be artistic. My creation is creating platforms for other people to be creative. So I'm not artistic.
Right.
I don't think I've ever done anything artistic in my entire life that was of any worth. But I still
Well,
feel like I create.
writing a poem would be considered artistic, even if it didn't go anywhere.
Dude, when you're in seventh grade, your poems aren't anything, man. Well, however old I was. Yeah,
Right.
it was just but yeah, no, you don't have to be artistic.
Yeah, and I think that's the heart of what I'm trying to get across is
Yeah.
just like,
Like
look, anyone doing something is a creator.
yeah, like you created a good life for your family.
Right.
Is that artistic? No. Is it important? Is it creative? Heck yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I talk about my wife a lot. Just she's a stay-at-home mom, doesn't do a traditional creation type thing, but I mean, she creates a wonderful home for her family and feeds
Yeah.
us and does all this stuff. It's like we
Yeah.
would fall apart without her.
Yeah. You
So yeah,
created
she's being
yeah.
very important.
And you guys created a good environment for your kids. And
Right.
hopefully like that carries on. Like they learn from what you've given them, what you've created for them,
Right.
and they can carry that on to the next generation.
Right.
Like we're all even like me not having kids, probably not gonna have kids. Like I'm still somewhat responsible for creating the next generation of humans that are hopefully going to treat each other right.
Right. So
And
I mean, ultimately, then is that what a life of creation is? Passing down the knowledge and the experiences that will make the next generation better people.
absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
that's
We're doing what we can to create a better world.
right. That's essentially the heart of a life of creation. Then
Yeah,
you and I
and if
solved it right there.
yeah, yeah, we're done. We're good.
Yeah.
But yeah, like as I said, I don't have kids. I probably won't, but I can still influence nieces and nephews. And, the other week I was out running and there was a little girl trying to find her lost dog. And I stopped what I was doing and helped her find her lost dog. And acts of kindness, I think, create a normalcy of people being kind to each other.
Right.
You hope that carries on.
And I mean, even there's that aspect, and even in what you do, how you are running your business is going to impact the lives of future yous.
100%.
And it's like if you're showing a good example now on how to be as an older veteran of the scene and how you look at the younger generations and treat
Hmm.
them and you go, okay, I did that. Now I'm doing this. I'm opening doors for you guys so that when you guys get to my spot, you know how to open doors for the next kids.
Yeah, and I think something that I think it's important for us to touch on is that some people, way too many as they get older, have the whole mindset of it was better my generation, and they try to strip the current generation of their value.
Right.
And like your hardcore isn't as good. Well, guess what? People said the same thing about our hardcore who were into it 10 years before we did, who saw
Right.
Gorilla Biscuits and stuff. 10 years before that, people who saw Minor Threat are telling me people who saw Gorilla Biscuits your hardcore isn't good. 10 years before that, people who saw The Damned and the Dead Boys and the Stooges are telling people who saw Minor Threat, your punk isn't validated.
Right.
10 years before that, some people were saying the same thing. Well, your rock and roll isn't any good because I saw Black Sabbath.
Right.
And you can keep doing that. You can always tear down the generation. And I think that is such a huge disservice because no
Right.
matter what generation you are, another generation is going to be able to put you down. And
Right.
hopefully they don't, because we shouldn't be discouraging each other from this.
Right. Call it the grumpy man syndrome.
Yeah, I really don't want to ever be that guy.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's easy when I hear these new bands and I'm like, dude, this is basically new metal. Like this is more influenced by Korn than Bad Brains.
Right. You're
But
like,
you know
oh,
what? Maybe I just don't get it. I'm glad that people are still doing something DIY.
right.
That's more important than the sound. So go do
Right.
it.
Yeah. I mean, it's every generation is going to have their sound, and
Hmm.
it's as veterans of, being in those kind of environments, we need to be the ones to be like, let the kids figure out their voice.
Yeah, I don't necessarily need to listen to it. I'm just glad that it's available to them.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I'm just happy that there is a scene,
Yeah,
you know.
because some kid who might be as troubled as I was at that age, it might save him too.
Right.
Might save her too. I want them to have that opportunity.
Question 6. Is there an experience or a time in your life where you realized you were a creator?
I think when I was really young and my parents got a computer and it was the one that was like black and the letters are green on it and they just had word processing and I used to just like type stories that weren't even like based in reality at all. But my imagination was coming up with these things and like
Right.
I had imaginary friends and stuff. And that's like creating your own reality, which, maybe at the time I didn't like know like, oh, being creative. But like when you look back on it, like I was being creative at a really young age.
Right.
And I might not have become aware of it until, years later when I started just doodling and writing dumb little things. But now looking back, I'm aware of my creation, like as going way back, like even
Right.
4 or 5 years old.
I look back and I remember my grandma always having a camera as a kid.
Yeah.
She was taking photos of everything, At the time, I hated it because it's always like, I don't want to get my photo taken. But the presence of a camera, like even my dad took
Hmm.
a lot of photos. So in my in my childhood memory is there's a camera always there. And then it just seemed like a natural progression to pick up a camera.
And you never really know how your actions are going to positively or negatively affect younger people. Like
Right.
music was always a part of my house. There's always like my parents were really into like Motown and soul
Nice.
and Beatles and Rolling Stones and Temptations and Four Tops and Sam Cooke. There's always music. And I didn't think it was that odd, but there was literally always music. So it was always something that I was drawn to. And they weren't doing it on purpose. It was just like, hey, we like music, we're gonna do
Right.
this. But it spawned a whole lifestyle for me
Right.
coming out of this thing.
Yeah. My dad was a music teacher, so he was
Yeah.
always playing music. And then my mom would always put on K Earth 101. the Goldie Oldie
Yeah.
station in the car,
Yeah.
and I have memories of listening to like early
I
rock
do
and
too.
roll. Yeah,
Like Lauren and I were in the car and we had it on and it was playing like it was playing 90s music, which is like that's oldies now. Oh dear. Like,
yeah,
like what's going on? But just like that that makes a positive environment
right,
for people where you're being you're being shown that it's okay to like the arts.
right,
It normalizes being into the arts and being into these things. And I think a lot of people probably don't get that in their lives because, parents have different priorities and different interests. Maybe your dad was just really into like building cars. And so that
right,
was what was shown to you. But
right,
we were both shown something that we turned into careers, but the careers in itself are
right.
creative. So, I think we're probably both pretty lucky in that regard that we were both shown these things at a young age.
Yeah. I'm reading a book called The Artist's Way right now. It's
Hmm.
supposed to be kind of like a daily devotional for an artist, but it's the premise is, you're a broken artist trying to rediscover your inner artist child. This last couple chapters was talking about how, some of these people didn't pursue what they're passionate about because as a child, they were discouraged from it, or
Mm,
they were told like you'll go nowhere if you just sit there doodling in class or whatever. And so these artists, potential artists, were broken at an early age, so they didn't do it.
yeah. Well,
Or I think you and I had kind of that a household where it's just like I didn't was never discouraged to pick up a guitar and play, even
yeah,
though my parents hated punk music. It was like
yeah. Well, I mean,
go for it.
I think that, I was like my musical side was definitely nurtured, but I think once I got serious about punk music, well, when I first got into it, I think my parents were kind of scared because I think like my dad is a high school teacher, and I think a lot of people's perception of punk music is the more nihilistic side of
Right,
negativity, but which I mean that's kind of what I got into at first, but then finding hardcore and like straight edge was here's a side of punk that is actually extremely positive.
right,
And so at first I think my parents were kind of skeptical because a lot of my dad's students who were into punk were screw ups.
right,
And that was probably a lot of my parents' perception of it. But I just found this other side of it that was so community based and positivity based. I think getting into that side and of it was life changing for me because it could have gone the other way. I could have become like Sid Vicious or
right, right.
someone who's as I said, like really nihilistic and materialistic too. I think there's an element of materialism in punk as well, but I got into a side that was much more based on, egalitarianism and community and uh, positivity
Yeah,
and work ethic.
yeah,
And
definitely.
you can't go wrong with those things all rolled into one.
Thankfully, that's the kind of the side I found into. I met more positive people going to hardcore shows than I did at, honor classes in high school. They're all just depressed or they went and got drunk on
Yeah,
Friday nights.
yeah.
It's
Like
like,
high school's a kind of a nightmare, and I didn't get along with almost anybody. It was tough. Even my own friends in high school were really, really mean to me. And, there's a reason I didn't haven't stayed in touch with them. And I think one of the reasons I got into hardcore is because they were into the more punk side of things. And
right,
I got to a point where I was like, I want to be into this, but I kind of want to be separated from these people, even though we're friends. Like I don't really like them. So I'm going to go do this thing that they don't like. And that's fine.
yeah. You found your way.
Yeah.
Question 7. Was there a family member or friend encouraging you to pursue your passion for creation?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, as soon as I started getting into music, my parents enrolled me in, I started playing trumpet in junior high, and then when I got into punk music, I got my first bass, and uh, I think when my family realized that this wasn't a trend for me and that I was getting into a more positive style, they really kind of embraced it
Right.
and nurtured it. And I think they're actually kind of proud of it now. Like sometimes my dad will wear like something with Revelation Records and he'll strike up a conversation, be like, well, my son, blah blah blah. Like, awesome. Like super awesome.
Right.
Like he'll just like randomly talk to someone with tattoos and just be like, have you ever heard of this? Well, my son does this. And it's like it's super cool. But they definitely, you know, nurtured the creative side. And my parents are very they weren't very strict with me. So they kind of let me choose my own course. Obviously, they wanted me to be a little bit safer, as I think a lot of parents do.
Right.
Um, I don't think they were thrilled when I got kicked out of UC Santa Cruz. Um, but they didn't discourage me from choosing my own path,
Right.
and I think they knew that I worked hard, and that I think when a person works hard, they can succeed just about anywhere.
Right.
Which it's I guess it's hard work in itself is creative because
Well, yeah.
if you're working hard, you're going to create something no matter what.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think about me personally, just the years I spent, scraping by as well, just pursuing the passion to shoot small bands and crappy
Yeah,
venues.
yeah. Could you and I have gone and sold insurance and made a grip of money and been financially safe? Yeah.
Souls would have died.
Yeah. Luckily, yeah, and luckily we were surrounded by people who were okay with the decisions we made.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I lived at my parents for a long time just to
Oh, I know
make
you
ends
did.
meet. And, they were, they saw I had a goal and they supported me in reaching that goal.
Yeah,
And I think that's really what a parent should do as I'm, trying to figure this out as a parent. So thankfully, my kids are still a little young. I don't have to worry about it completely yet, but
yeah.
it's
But
always in
but
the back of my mind.
But I think you're probably your kids are probably at an age where you're going to start seeing passions and interests develop.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So how do you deal with that now? Is like if you don't agree with something that they're into or you don't share it with them, you know, you got to kind of think back to how your parents, like how would my parents have dealt with it, or what's,
Right.
you know, I don't know. There's decisions like that. I don't think I'm capable of making, which is one of the reasons I don't have kids. Is
Right.
I don't trust myself with those decisions.
No parent will ever be perfect, so the goal is
No.
just to do the best you can and hope that
Yeah.
you did enough to make them able to make good choices.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
no kids ever going to be perfect either.
yeah, exactly. And right now I try and get involved with whatever my kids are into to a degree. Like my youngest really loves Hot Wheel cars, and I started collecting Hot Wheel cars
Of course
because
you
of
did.
him. And yeah, exactly. Um, but it's like I saw his passion for it, and so I studied it and researched it a little bit and kind of found out the there's like the big community of Hot Wheel collectors. So I started, picking up a few, or I would take him to Target and be like, "Hey, let's go check out the Hot Wheels." And now it's a fun thing.
Yeah.
I have a bin full of unopened ones now, and he's just like what are you doing? Like, you're crazy. Let me open those things.
You gotta let him, man. What are you doing?
What I usually do is if there's one that I think could be valuable later, I put there and maybe buy him another one
Okay.
and say, this bin is for you. I'm just saving it for
Yeah.
you.
Well, and the other bin is college fund.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Just like record collecting, man.
Question 8. Where do you find inspiration? And do you have a creative process that you follow once inspiration hits?
I find inspiration in everything in daily life. I find a lot of inspiration in wanting to make a positive impact um, through my job. I find inspiration in my mental health journey. I think that's a really big one because it hasn't always been easy and I've needed diversions, I've needed outlets, and what I do through my work provides me with both of those. I find a positive inspiration in my relationship with my wife and my family, and I want to be the best version of myself for them.
Right.
So it's made me really focus on bettering myself. I find inspiration in, I mean, almost everything. And I feel like I'm a very perceptive person where I'm very aware of things going on around me. And I let a lot of things affect me. Like I let politics affect me negatively if I don't agree with what's happening, or I let, you know, when things at work aren't going well, I let it affect me. And sometimes it drives me to do an even better job at work. Like, with the current climate of things politically, I think a lot of people are feeling down and alienated. And, music and the music scene gives people an alternative to being constantly bombarded with negativity through the media, through the news. Um, so, like, some things that could be effective negatively turn into a positive, you know, push towards my creativity and my passion because I want it's more important than ever to give people this opportunity to be creative.
Right.
And, you know, the experience of my own mental health gives me more of a passion to give someone else the opportunity to deal with their mental health in a positive way through music. So I get inspiration from a lot of negative things and try to turn it into a positive environment for other people's creative outlets.
Right.
Um, and that's a huge part of my growing up is not letting negative things continue to spiral, but like how can I use these things that are perceived by most people to be negative? Like how can I turn it around? How
Right.
can I make someone else's life better who might be dealing with what I'm dealing with? Who might be going through their own identity crisis. Um, I think there's times when we all need a little help and a little positivity, and I want to make sure that opportunity is there for people.
Question 9.
Okay.
Not everyone gets paid to create something they are passionate about, but where do you see the value in people still pursuing their passions even if they aren't getting paid? And then how can we encourage others to live a life of creation even when their creations go unnoticed?
Oh man, that second part's hard to answer. I think it's so important to not let people get discouraged. And the last one we talked about positivity, and like I think kids have a tendency to get frustrated because they might not necessarily have developed the tools to deal with problem solving issues. I think patience is such a huge part of it, especially if you're not getting paid to do what you're passionate about. You know, I think a well-adjusted human being sees the value in doing things creatively, but it's so important to not discourage people from being creative. I mean, there's just so many things in this world, in arts and in science and in any kind of technology, like came from a place of passion and creativity. And like, what would the world be like if we didn't let people do these things? And, you know, and in so many cases, like important breakthroughs might not have come from someone who was necessarily getting paid to do it, but it happened anyways.
Right.
And it had a huge impact on the entire world. I can't convince you know, the person next door that, doing something, you know, creative and fulfilling that isn't going to net them any kind of material value is worth it.
Right.
Like, I don't know how you convince someone to do that, but it's true. Like,
Right.
even though you're not creating something that's going to be lucrative or even like physically tangible, it's important. I just don't know how to express it to someone who might not have the same values as us.
I would say the whole basis of punk and hardcore, it was no one was getting paid.
Mm-mm.
It
And
was pure passion.
yeah, when you think about it, like the most important bands, most important record labels didn't happen because someone wanted to have a successful record label. They did it because they had to.
Right.
Like no one would put out a Black Flag record, so they started their own label. SST Records was born. No one wanted to put out, Teen Idols and Minor Threat records, so Ian MacKaye did it themselves. And those two labels are literally the blueprint for what every single other label in the scene does. Like
Right.
they're it. And they were they didn't think for a second about financial success. I don't think they still don't, but they set the whole thing up for everybody else out of sheer necessity because nobody else was going to do it. They had no plans of getting rich, and at least in the case of Discord, they are still one of the most ethically well-run labels in the world. The way they treat their bands, the way they treat their employees, the way they price their records, and because Ian and Fugazi and all of his offshoots, because of the way they carry themselves, they are so well respected. They can stick to the most dogmatic ethics they have and still make a good living because they're that important and they held that strong to their integrity.
I was just thinking about, my youngest son tonight was like, I want to put on a concert for you guys, and he just sang a ridiculous song about Legos being everywhere. And I think, it's easy as a parent to just ignore your kid who just wants to do something goofy and, silly. But it's like, me and my wife and my oldest son came out and sat down on the couch and watched him perform this song. And it's like you could see it's soul fulfilling to him because we all took the time to sit down and just
Yeah.
watch him go crazy.
You taught him an extremely important lesson that you validated his expression.
Right. And that's kind of what I was getting at. Is like, you had talked about it kind of earlier. If people aren't getting their creation seen, what what's the point? But it's like if you know someone who does something, you do have an opportunity to support them in it. Even if they're
Mhm.
not getting paid, it's
Yeah.
nothing crazy. Just
If
showing up
yeah.
sometimes is all you need, like you said. buying a ticket to the punk show. You're there. You
You
made an
you made a
impact.
difference.
Yeah.
So, and it doesn't matter if your kid is singing to three people in a living room or 3,000 people in a venue. He might feel the exact same fulfillment personally.
Yeah.
Like he made his family smile. How cool is that?
Right. At six
You
years
know?
old, it's all he needs.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Seriously, that's awesome.
Talking to other people has encouraged me to kind of take a step back and kind of see the areas that my boys are, you know, expressing themselves in different ways and going, okay, I need to be intentional about pausing and acknowledging that more.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because, we get caught up in life and it's busy and everything, but it's like my kids love to read, they love to draw, they build Legos, they are writing songs and stories themselves already. It's like we need to sit down and read their book. We need to
Hmm.
sit down and make a comment on their art. Just encourage them to keep pursuing these things.
And it's so easy, probably at the end of a day of work, to just come home, zonk out, and watch TV or do something that's kind of isolating.
Right.
It takes effort to be that present in
Yeah.
their lives. Maybe I'm a little bit biased because of what I do, but being a facilitator of creativity in other people's lives is probably might be more important than the creativity itself or the creation itself. Every important piece of art and discovery is not just about the discovery itself, but it's the people who made it happen behind the scenes.
Right. And I mean, it's people like you who present it to the world.
Yeah. And it's the parents who nurture creativity in the kids.
Well, last question.
Okay.
Question 10. How would you like to see yourself grow as a creator?
Well, as I said before, I've never really thought about my future. Growth has never been a big part, but I've been kind of in secret trying to teach myself piano and
Nice.
trying to, branch out. I've been toying with the idea of writing a book, not necessarily about punk music, but like I think like it's really hard to describe mental health to people who don't experience it and understand it.
Right.
So I started kind of outlining something about like I want to make a humorous book describing what it feels like to go through these things, trying to describe it to someone who's never felt it before.
Right.
And because it's hard to talk about, and there's been a lot of cases where someone I've been close with has just told me something like, man up, or just don't be sad. Like it doesn't work like that. So, I've for years wanted to increase the different ways that I could be creative. Like I really would love to write and play more music. I would love to actually write more. Um, there's a lot that I want to say and there's a lot that I want to do, but at the end of the workday, I'm tired and I
Right.
don't, just losing myself in some hockey games sometimes is a better remedy than anything else.
Right.
But I do want to do these things. It's just like motivation and time and energy. And also part of my growth as a creator is continuing to find better ways to facilitate at work.
Right.
And, you know, I need to be better at delegating work to other people. Like, all the dumb clerical data entry, like anyone could do that with enough practice. Like I shouldn't have to do all that. So like I need to be like, okay, you can trust other people with this work. You don't have to do it all. Like give yourself more time to do the proactive creative things that are going to be bringing in money. So, you it's dude, it's so hard to break these habits, man. Like you know
Oh
what
yeah,
it is.
definitely.
Like when, especially when you get older and it's like cemented. Like this is what I do. This is when I do it. I'm not changing for anybody.
Yeah.
So I
What
mean,
I think our generation too, we're just told put your head down, do the work. It's funny, everyone around our age is now kind of has people under them to a degree.
yeah,
Like I have junior photographers under me,
yeah,
you got employees, and it's just like we have such a hard time trying to figure out how to hand off what we spent our entire lives getting to and just
yeah,
being like, all right, now it's your turn. Go for it.
yeah,
I will help you when you need it, but
yeah.
it's on you now. It's such a
Because
hard transition.
because you and I know the best way to do it all. We know the fastest way to do it all. This other dude, it might take him 5 years to figure that out. And you know what? It's gonna piss us off to no end watching them try to do it. And we're gonna hover and we're gonna micromanage because we
Yeah,
know the right way to do it and they don't.
right.
So
And we could do it in like 5 minutes.
yeah. So like you gotta take the training wheels off, man. Like let these people do this thing because you can't do it all.
Yeah,
And
exactly. I mean, that's
I
what it
get
comes down to. We can't.
and when it gets really busy at work and I'm like, have you ever seen that movie Uncut Gems?
No, I've been told to do it because I love gyms.
Because it's like the whole movie is just like nothing but stuff happening. It's like literally 2 hours of boom, 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 doing this, like fast dialogue. Like sometimes that's my day at work.
Right,
Like there's my phone will ring, you know, 20 times in an hour. I get texts all day from the people I stupidly give my number to. You know, there's days that I'll send 400 emails and it's just nonstop. And I need to like take some of that and just move it to this guy over
right.
here or this girl over here. But it's
It's hard.
so hard and
Yeah,
it will give me more time to be creative and to facilitate,
right,
awesome things to happen for other people. So yeah, that's part of my growth as a creator is delegation and nurturing my own desire to be creative, which I'm not very good at
right,
because I get discouraged because I write something and I'll be like, well, this is terrible. You sound like a seventh grader and just throw it away.
right,
I can't tell you how many things I started, like songs I started to write or papers that I started to write. I was just like, this sucks. I'm gonna get rid of it. And, briefly I was interviewing people for a hardcore website and it felt great. Like one of the ones was Eric from Nerve Agents. And I was doing all these interviews and they were awesome. And then I was reading them back and going like, wow, I sound like an idiot. And I stopped doing them, and so I was like kind of cutting myself off from doing
right.
something it was really gratifying.
So we need to
And
go back to what was that question? Just doing it
yeah,
because it's soul fulfilling.
do it because of soul. I know. And,
Doesn't have to be good.
and I think expecting certain results isn't good. I think when your expectations are too high, you're only setting yourself up for failure. And even if the end product is really good, you might never think it's good, because you set your sights too high. Like doing it because you want to do it, you cannot fail.
Right.
Doing it to get something out of it fulfilling, you can't fail. Nothing you can do is wrong or bad.
Because
So,
it doesn't matter in the end. Um, but I mean, artists are their own worst critic. I
oh,
hate most
absolutely.
things I do, but it's
Oh, yeah.
the key, I think, is finding those people who you trust to be like, "Hey, what do you think?" And more often than not, they'll probably be like, "That sounds pretty good, actually," or "Yeah, it sucks, but maybe try it this way," or
Yeah. I mean, you want someone who's going to tell you the truth.
right, exactly,
You can tell someone something sucks, but put the kind of spin on it that's constructive.
right, yeah, positive criticism
Yeah.
or constructive criticism. Is that what
Yeah.
that's the term?
Which which is one of the most important things in the music industry. You need someone that's going to tell you something's a bad idea. And you also need someone to say, I don't care if you think this is a bad idea. I'm going to do it anyways because it makes me happy. That's probably a whole other interview to talk about. Like it's a whole different can of worms, dude. I don't know. I don't have any answers, obviously.